start my AI companion here, and we're also going to record. And Melissa, on your end, record as well. And then, Melissa, I'm going to go ahead and spotlight you so you can kick it off. Okay,
Wonderful.
spotlight. There you go. And I'm going to remove me. Okay.
Right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Melissa Davis. I'm one of the Office of Equity Events Managers. Um, my pronouns are she, her. I have brown curly hair that's up in a bun today, and I'm wearing reading glasses with a brown sweater. The Office of Equity is committed to hosting accessible events that promote belonging, justice, dignity, honor, and respect. We have some language services for you today. We do have our CART captioner who is on with us right now. To use, you can click the live transcript CC icon at the bottom of the screen next to the reactions icon, and then click show subtitle. Captions can be enlarged in settings and picked up and moved to a different location on your screen with your cursor. Unfortunately, due to the need to reschedule this from last week, we were unable to secure ASL interpreters. We hope that you're able to review the captions and that will be of assistance. I got to move to this page, sorry. We will not be pausing for questions during the first part of the agenda. When we get to the third topic, there are many ways to participate in today's Zoom event using the buttons at the bottom of your Zoom screen. The raise hand icon, raise hand button using the reactions icon, keyboard shortcuts for Windows, Alt Y, keyboard shortcut to raise or lower your hand. For the Mac, Option Y, keyboard shortcut to raise or lower your hand. A note on the chat. You're free to use the chat, but chat is not accessible to those who use screen readers and other assistive technology. We will have a resource page for items that are also shared in the chat, and we will make sure to give verbal directions. That is the accessibility statement. Jolene, am I introducing you?
Yes, please.
So, all right, we're going to get going. Jolene Jang has spent 28 plus years energizing events as the fun specialist and meeting maximizer and working with Fortune 500 companies like HP, Starbucks, and Microsoft. Now she champions workplace inclusion, emphasizing the financial and cultural value of Asian inclusivity. In response to rising anti-Asian violence post-COVID-19, Jolene has delivered 250 plus presentations over the past 3.5 years using gamified methods to address sensitive topics. Her advocacy helped inspire protective legislation for women and children, leading to similar efforts nationwide. Founder of Empowered Asians and Asian Allies and host of Aren't Asians All Alike, she educates audiences about AANHPI experience. She also coaches Asian Americans in confident communication. Jolene has been featured on Oprah, The Today Show, Good Morning America, and more. All right, Jolene, take it away.
Okay, I'm going to pin myself. There we go. Here you are. There you go. And remove spotlight. Bam! Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for that, Melissa. I am 50 years old. I'm a petite Asian woman. I am non-disabled. My pronouns are she and her. And I have brown hair. I put on some false eyelashes that may or may not fall off. I don't wear makeup usually. So, and then I'm wearing a white top with the brown hair. I am ethnically Chinese, Japanese, and Swedish, and culturally Japanese American. And we're in let's see, Northgate, and so this is on the land of the Duwamish. And then behind me, I have a red background, and I have some QR codes for my podcast and my information. So we are just coming off of Martin Luther King Day, which I think most people know. But what people probably don't know is Korean American Day. And I just learned that myself. So that was January 13th. And that was celebrating the first wave of Korean immigrants. And they came to Hawaii in 1903. So don't say you didn't learn anything today. So, real quick, before we get Megan up here, go ahead and put in the chat, how do you identify? If you can put in the chat, Asian American Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, put a 1. Or if you identify as Black, put a 2 in the chat. 3 for Hispanic, 4 for white, and 5 for other. And we'll just kind of see who is here. And then, Melissa, I'm going to pass it back to you to introduce Megan.
Thank you.
Spotlight you.
All right. Megan Matthews is the director of Washington State's Office of Equity, boldly advancing a Washington for all. She has been a public servant in Washington state government for 16 years, working her way up from an entry-level position. She is committed to a lifelong journey of pursuing and living the values of equity and justice. She is courageous and innovative leader, loves a good debate, and strives to maintain her humility. Megan earned her master's degree in public administration from the Evergreen State College. Megan co-taught a master's program at the Evergreen State College, emphasizing democratic governance and social change for current and future public administrators. Megan is dedicated to social justice and ensuring fairness and hope for everyone, especially the next generation that includes her daughters, nieces, and nephews. Megan, I'll pass it over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Um, I'm excited to be here with you, and I just really appreciate the grace. I was so sick last week. I woke up and I ended up sleeping for like 17 hours. And so you can still hear it in my voice a little bit. But I am feeling much better, and I am excited to be here for this conversation. I'm just excited for this. It's so important to me to, spread unity, to spread togetherness, to figure out how we all exist together, and create a space, at least in Washington State, that works for everybody, a Washington for all. So I am very excited for this opportunity to engage in dialogue, hopefully modeling how we all can engage in this dialogue and learn from each other to create a Washington, and a space wherever we are, that is open for everybody.
Yes, and Megan, we met at Happen, the Asian American Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander group. Um, and I remember saying, "Oh, that's Megan. We need to talk to her." And I personally want to make sure that Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islanders are speaking up and getting into these committees and running things. And so I talked to you, Megan, and so here we are today. Why did you say yes?
Yeah. So one, who's gonna tell Jolene no? Okay. Okay. No, I really appreciated your energy, your honesty, and I want to be in spaces with people who are really trying to change what is into what needs to be. And I think that a lot of the message that you gave is about we need space, and specifically in Happen, right? So for the state employees, Happen is the BRG for the AA, NIPH community. Wait,
NHPI. It takes a lot of
NHPI.
practice.
Wait, hold on. I was like, wait a minute, that's not
You were
right.
really
And
good. It took a while. I like,
no, no, no,
seriously.
no, no. I know that was wrong. The ANI, NHPI community. So Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander community. Um, and it was the annual event, and it was so amazing just to the dances, the cultures. That I mean, that community has so many different ethnic groups, right? And this is part of the dialogue about, okay, first it was just Asian, and then it was, how do we create visibility for all the different beautiful cultures, in this community? And I really, just appreciated being in the space, just being allowed, being present in the space to observe. And one of the things you talked about is advocacy, the importance of advocacy for self. And I know that, at least from what I'm hearing, that sometimes is difficult, in the PINH community. And for me, I wanted to make sure that whatever we could do to create space, and support for folks in that community to feel like they could advocate for themselves better. But also, we talked about the um, the stereotypes about the Black and Asian communities specifically amongst each other and that complicated history and narrative. And, for me, um, I want to speak truth about what has happened, right? But also know that, like Larry was saying earlier, we can't continue to be pit against each other, but also there's also a lot of beautiful stories about us coming together and supporting one another. Those stories aren't always highlighted, right? Because they don't support the status quo of us supposedly being enemies. And I wanted that opportunity to kind of talk more about that. Um, and for folks who don't often have the opportunity to speak to folks who have different, who are from a different ethnic or racial group, they don't have those opportunities for hearing from others. We wanted to create that space. And I think the passion and the fire that you have, and my passion and fire, and we come together. I was like, we're gonna be here all day, you know?
Oh,
And so I
yeah,
was just
yeah, yeah.
excited to be able to come together with you. Um, and the Office of Equity is such an important beacon of hope in state government. We're a newer office. We were established to facilitate policy and systems change. And I just plain talk that by saying we're here to change the way government operates. What do we do? We're here to change status quo. And we're here to advance a Washington for all. And advancing a Washington for all means making space for us all and having the hard conversations, but leaving with a way that appreciates and respects the beauty, the humanity of all of us. And so I was excited for this. Plus, we get to talk, and I just love talking anyway. So, but I won't talk the whole time, I promise.
So I would say for my why, Black and Asians perspectives, this is something that is never seen. And Megan, you just talked about these hidden stories of solidarity. Yeah, solidarity. What? I've never heard of that. The only thing I know is Black and Asian clash, 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 pitted against each other. Model minority myth and all of that. So my why, I'll say this. People think that, oh, aren't Asians all alike? Most non-Asians think we're all alike. And as you spoke about the diversity, 48 countries, three territories, hundreds of religions and languages. And you have like myself, who's fourth generation in America. It is really difficult for me to relate to a first generation immigrant. But I'm starting to learn the stories, but I can't relate, and I don't think they get confused with me, right? So in terms of I may be seen as kind of white because I act in a certain way. So there's that. And then you also have mixed people. So, I'm Japanese, Chinese, and Swedish. And so aren't Asians all alike? Oh, no. And where does the black piece come in? So there's a couple of things. We are targets of hate. I think that's pretty clear. But we also do not know each other's history. And, future going history is, you know, it's not really told right now, but who can say about the future? We've got to do something. And with the surge of, with COVID, when Trump said COVID, Kung flu and China flu and blames China, well, then all of us who look Asian were the targets of that, and we still are. And that surge is still rampant and very bad. Then we're not talking about that today, but this is why we need to talk about this. And there are Black people who hate Asians also, and there are Black people who also attack Asians. So I think that is important to talk about. Why is there such this? Why are there so many butting heads against each other of Black and Asian? Why is that? And so, what we're going to do today is really just talk about three different points here. And it's just these 3 points that's right there. To be able to shatter the divide, we're going to talk about embracing authenticity and identity, Black and Asian solidarity, and we're going to touch on a little bit of history and leading with vulnerability. And what I think is so important about Megan and I talking is that it is so hard to find Black and Asian conversations. I've only in the last 3.5 years, I've only seen 4 panels that have this. And so let's talk about red table talk. Oh, first of all, I want to ask you this question. Do you see or feel tension in the black with black and Asians? So go ahead and put in the chat. And I'm going to put a 1 for yes. I see it. I feel it. And Megan, what about you? Go ahead and vocalize. What do you sense that tension?
I, you know, I think what I would say is what we, what is being put out in media is that there is tension. And so sometimes what it feels like is that that tension is real. I think historically there, and this is why I say this, because at the same time you have situations where Black and Asian people are interacting in a negative way. You also have examples of Black and Asian folks interacting in a positive way and supporting each other. But those are the stories we hear. So I think if we think about the stories that we do hear, then I think that it makes sense that most folks would feel tension between Black and Asian people. But I also think it depends on if I'm interacting with Asian people, I may not experience that in the same way because we are working together. So I want to acknowledge that
Hmm.
the media, right, and what stories get told and what stories do not get told are perpetuating a narrative that there is tension. But I would also understand that there are a lot of experiences, real experience historically and current, where that is not the same story. Um, I would say, so for me, Megan's own personal experience, I'm not experiencing that. But I also know where there are places that where that experience is happening.
Yes, indeed. Well, I feel it all the time and all day long because I was doing timelines of attacks on Asians and that are daily, and that's on my website jolenejang.com, where you see timeline of attacks, and it is brutal to see the attacks and all the violence and the hate, and so that tension is there. And let's talk about red table talk. And Megan, I asked if you could watch this. It's just a half an hour long. So for those of you who don't know Red Table Talk, it's Jada Pickett, who's a movie star, and she's married to Will Smith. And so she has a program with her mom and her kids. And so in this particular one, they're talking about the conflict between Black and Asian. And so and they invited a moderator, a Black moderator, and then Lisa Ling, who is Chinese American journalist. So I'm sure people probably haven't seen this. So what did you share with us, kind of your thoughts around this topic and how they shared it?
Yeah, I think it was beautiful. And there was also another, I can't remember her name, another Asian speaker joined later as well to add to the dialogue.
Oh,
I just
really?
wanted to
Oh, I
highlight.
missed that. Okay.
What?
Well,
Yeah.
I talk about this program all,
Uh-oh.
so I have to watch it again because it just
Yeah.
it makes me so mad, actually. So talk about your beautiful thing that you saw, and I'll tell you what I saw.
Yeah. So uh what was beautiful to me was growth. So, and I feel like no one entered left the conversation the same way they entered. So
Hmm.
when we're talking about the opportunity to have dialogue, part of that also is being open to learning. And so what I experienced in that was generationally too, that the Willow, so Jada and Will's daughter, um, has had much more interaction across race, ethnicity, and culture. And there was evidence in what she was speaking versus Grandma may not have had very much interaction, and that was evident in how she approached the conversation. I um, thought that the other speakers um, had really hard things to add, but important things to add. I think that the conversation wasn't done in a way that skated around any of the issues. And at the end, I could see evolution in thinking and the need to let me not. One of the points that I really appreciated in that actually was we like we'll say we're seeing the hate attacks and things like that, right? Instead of ascribing that to an individual, we ascribe that to a whole culture. So when we say we see blacks that don't like Asians, we're ascribing a whole culture of people, a whole bunch of black people, right? Based off a couple of interactions of a couple of individuals. And the longer that we continue to operate in a way that says, oh my gosh, I had a bad experience with someone who doesn't look like me, they are whatever ethnic group, whatever racial group. Um, so that means that whole culture, I'm going to describe that whole experience and now put that on the whole entire culture. We have to move away from that and let the individual be the individual. And so that's how you allow folks to step into their whole self. And so I actually appreciated that because it felt like that's where that conversation ended. Um, and so that's what I thought was beautiful about it. Now, why did it make you angry, Jolie?
Oh, the hackles. I'm just like, oh. So I also think it was powerful. I think we both think it was powerful, but it was not beautiful to me. It was aggravating and frustrating um, limited. So you have four black folks, and I don't remember the last Asian. I have to watch that again, but four black folks and one Asian, and the audience probably mostly black. And that's just always a difficult situation to be in. And I've been in that situation, and it's very intimidating. And I think what's so tough about it, it's real, it's true, and it's real. I'm going to read just from the beginning. Gammy, our grandma, said this. I was at the airport and waiting in line for a coffee, and I had a conversation with a white gentleman who's my age in front of me. And then I had a conversation with a young white couple behind me. And I've never had an Asian come up to me who I didn't know to talk to me, to give me eye contact of any sort. They come into our communities, take over our stores, take over our hair and nail industry, and block us from being able to thrive in that industry. We come into the stores, get our hair and nails done, and what do they give back to the community? And then negative, negative, negative. Um, Megan, what did you think about that? And then for the rest of you, put in the chat what words come to mind. But Megan, what are your thoughts? How do you receive that?
Well, I'm not, I think what I would say is that was her honest thoughts
Hmm.
based on her conversation. I'm not going to judge someone based on what their initial thoughts were, especially because what I do believe is that at the end of the conversation, um, she was always open to listening, even though it was hard based on what her experiences were. And at the end, she was like, I think I understand more now. And so I don't want to get into where I'm, talking about what she has said. Um, and I would really like to focus on that people can come together having different opinions and biases based on, what they've lived, what they've grown up around. But I think in order for us to come forward, we one need to create the space where people can be honest about what they've thought so that they can learn and grow.
So I'll say this. I think what Gammy said, true. I mean, true for her, but also I think that's like from my perspective, what you said, yeah, is true. Right? Asians, it's like, and I think when we don't know more of the story, if we don't know about Asians or we don't know about Black people, then we're missing the whole boat. So they just scratch the surface. The idea that an Asian random person striking up a conversation, unless it's my parents, that's probably not going to happen, unless you've been here for a while. And so understanding culture, So, for example, my Vietnamese ex-husband, so they're boat people. They came over after the war in 1970s, Vietnamese, and they escaped and they were, they had to set their boat on fire in order to be rescued. And they were on an island for a year and shared a sugar cube for four people or each day, so, and there are many stories like this. And so when his parents came over and him, they both had double majors. I'm sorry, yeah, degrees, double degrees, engineers came over here and then they're in the projects and they have nothing and then they're cleaning bathrooms. And I think that's much of the story. And so the idea of, oh, they're taking over our stores and they're booting us out, and that may that may be the case. However, for example, like the nails. There was a refugee camp in California. And Tippi Hedren, so this is a movie star in the late 70s, and she would go to the refugee camp and visit with the folks. And so the Vietnamese ladies, they really wanted to work. And they had this conversation looking at Tippi's nails, like, oh, those are pretty. And so what she did, Tippi, she trained them, she got them certified in nail tech, to be in cosmetology with nail tech as a nail technician. And then that became the thing. So that's the one skill that they have. They don't have the language, they didn't have anything. They got the one skill, and then they've shared it with their family and their friends. And so, yes, they are in Black communities, but they're not of privilege. I feel like reading the comments and things where all these Asian people, they're rich and they do this and they hate us and blah blah blah. And that may be the case, not maybe not rich, but there's so much more behind that story. And I see, particularly in this Red Table Talk, it's um, immigrants. It's the first generation of Koreans and Vietnamese and Black folks, and they just don't know their stories. So if they could have a non-transactional conversation, I think that would help.
And I
Um,
think that's what we're here, like what we're
yeah.
doing from this, because one of the things from the Red Top Table Talk that I liked was that they talked about, if we think about structural racism and redlining and segregation,
Hmm.
right? The neighborhood and the fact that um, where are people able to get licenses and who got licenses, right? Black people may not have been able to get licenses for businesses, but for these Asian folks who are opening these businesses, that might have been the only locations that they could
Yep.
open businesses,
And they can
right? So,
afford. Yeah.
so we have to think about the structures and the systems. And for state employees, my colleagues on the call, these are the conversations that we actually have a role to play in to varying degree, right? Depending on what your body of work is, the way you're making decisions, how you are, your policies, your practices, every day, what you're deciding to do, are you creating barriers for a group of people or are you creating access for a group of people? Because redlining and segregation, those were government processes, right? Our licensing processes right now in the state for professional licenses, for businesses, things like that, like permits, right? If we're talking about where people can open businesses and where people can live, those are things that we have as a state um, influence and control over. And so as you're doing your work, be thinking about how am I either aiding in access or perpetuating barriers and creating tensions between groups of people who are all just trying to survive.
Yeah, and I think that's a key point, trying to survive. And you think of the generation immigrants, they got one thing. And like with the Cambodians, it's donuts, right? The donuts in California, it's all donuts because the donut king, right? And it's like you got one thing when you escaped and survived. And with Cambodians, it's genocide, right? And so you're not coming from privilege. You're just trying to survive. You're not trying to box anybody out of industries. And so I think I would love to see more conversations where we can really talk like this. And I do, Megan, I agree that it's so, the people on this call have so much influence and power to do huge things.
Mhm.
I wanted to make mention of this here. I asked if people could give their reactions, and there's like 6 reactions. And there's 55, let's see, 42% Asians on this call. And I would say probably these are not Asians speaking, right? So that's a thing we have to speak up, particularly when it's Black and Asian, because we will never be heard. I know it's intimidating, but we have to. And here's an opportunity. So, are there anybody out there, Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, who could speak to the eye contact? So, Gammy talked about eye contact, and like, an Asian wouldn't come talk to me and give me any eye contact. Can I have any of you come up and tell us about eye contact in your culture? Can anybody raise their hand? The perfect opportunity. Oh, come on. Come on. Okay, there we go. All right. Um, Nagmana.
Yeah, you got it right. Thanks, Jolene. Hi,
Okay.
my name is Nagmana Shirazi. I actually work at the Office of Equity with Megan, and I'm Asian American. I'm from Pakistan originally. And when we talk about eye contact, I think that was one of the most difficult things I had to learn because in my culture, in Pakistan, India, Nepal, Bangladesh, as well as farther east, you don't look elders in the eye and speak to them. The boss is always 35 feet tall, so you never look at them in the eye and speak with them. It's a mark of just respect to look at people in the eye and speak with them. So we were always, as youngsters, growing up, we always looked at the floor, the teacher, whomever, right? You always looked at the floor and you spoke with them. And it's a mark of respect. And so that was really hard for me to learn when I immigrated about 15 years ago. That was just something, oh my God. Yeah, it was very hard.
Yes. Thank you, Nagmana. And Kenley, and then Rachel, and then we'll move on.
Hi, can people hear me? I'm Kenley
Yes.
Asato, she, they pronouns. I'm Japanese and Native Hawaiian, and in my culture, it is very disrespectful to look people in the eye. Oh, let me try to figure out how to lower my hand. Um, However, being from Hawaii, it is completely typical to talk to strangers, like at the store or just in random places. Um, but there is that, I guess, like weird juxtaposition of like you should also not make a ton of eye contact. So it is a struggle, and I've noticed how it's kind of kept me from like advancing in my career because like in interviews and whatnot, I might not make as much eye contact because it is considered like if I'm looking you in the eye. Also, I'm shorter, so maybe that also played part of it too. But it's harder to look people in the eye because it's disrespectful, and maybe also because of the height difference.
Yes. Thank you for that. This is rich information. Just imagine when we can exchange these ideas. And Rachel, go ahead. You're unmuted. You're unmuted.
There
There
we
you
go.
are.
Hi,
Great.
I'm Rachel Friedrich. I use she and her pronouns, and I am Filipino American, first generation American born. And growing up, my mom would always say, look at your feet. Don't look at your, especially elders. That's a sign, like many people have said, it's a sign of respect. And if you look at someone in the eye, it's like being rude and disrespectful. And um, I found that myself, I mean, I've had like I was in my mid 20s before I even figured out, hey, that's not something in Western culture because like I would look down at my feet if my boss was ever talking to me or something. So they can interpret that in Western culture as disrespect or like you're not as invested in the conversation or your work. And I even had a coworker once tell me, "Oh, you're quiet as a mouse." So, but it's like I have had to struggle to train myself not to do that because I don't want to be a mouse. I want to be a lion. I want to advance. But that's something the uh the eye contact thing, that's a cultural thing that a lot of people aren't aware of.
Yeah. Huge. Okay, Lynn, and then we'll move on. Thank you, Rachel. Appreciate it. Go ahead, Lynn.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for making time to share this with all of us. And thank you for bringing this up. I do feel as a first generation Chinese American who also is from Taiwan. So I have double, identities already. And I really feel we can definitely share about our cultural differences, but also know that don't use that as a way to kind of blankly cover everyone who is a Chinese American, for example. Because I know that I was growing up asked not to look people in the eyes, just to kind of be sure to show your respect, particularly for your elders. But I also know that there are people who have, come from different part of the country, who have different kind of upbringings, and they will not mind for something like that. So my word of caution is that's just not use this as a way for us to do more stereotyping, and that we should really keep an open mind. I always ask people if that makes them feel okay, if it's acceptable. I think if you are willing to say that, then you definitely will have more people understand each other and embrace each other's diversity. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. And yes, so yes, we need Asians need to learn. We are in America, and if hey, you want something, you kind of have to conform, unfortunately, and with DEI being canned. So it's like and for other people, Black people included, like, okay, try and understand some of these cultures. So it's both. We both need to do all these things in order to make it happen. And then a question here. Um, when going to Chinese food, this is another question for Asian Americans, Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders. Do you expect friendly service? Like, hi, how are you? Thanks for being here. And the reason I bring this up is I was watching one of those panels that was Black and Asian, and the Black person was saying, "Oh yeah, they were so rude, didn't even greet me, and didn't make eye contact and all this stuff." And I'm thinking, oh my gosh. Uh, when was, and I'm 50, and in my entire life, it was only the last 3 years that I've had a Chinese restaurant greet me and like, did I just see a smile? Are you kidding me? Did that just happen? And somebody said hello. I was like, whoa, that's just not what happens at Chinese food. If it is probably not authentic. It's probably in a suburb and it's American Chinese or Panda Express. And so, um, yeah, so that's something that I think doesn't, yeah. And so here's, okay. So, point here is we need to start chatting, getting to know each other so we can kind of get on the same side and work together. And so, with that, and by the way, for those who from the Asian American Native Hawaiians, when you go to a Chinese restaurant, do you expect friendly wait staff? The answer is no, 78% no. And by the way, Megan, what do you think about that? Is that funny or what do you think
I mean,
about that?
I think there would be maybe some things in common between the Black and the NHPI community with this necessarily in service because it's cultural. It's not
Hmm.
surprising. It's cultural to me. When you go
Hmm.
into a Black restaurant, you're going to expect a different dynamic
Hmm.
than you would in a different type of restaurant too. And I think I really like what you said, Lynn, because none of us are a monolith, even though we're categorized based on how we appear, or where we're from, or the accent we use. No, we're not a monolith. So all Black people don't think alike. All Black people don't act alike. And I would say for the same thing for any ethnic group, even if you're thinking about all Chinese people, all Vietnamese people, all Hawaiian people, we're not all the same. And so
Mm-hmm.
the more that we allow people to be individuals, the more that we will create space for us all, the less we'll have to feel confined by what our own cultural norms say that we have to be. the more freedom we can all express. Um, and, that could open up doors for all sorts of things that we could become in life. And so I think as individuals, now there are some, we do, there is truth to our cultural upbringing, but I would say that, in our workspaces right now, we're state employees, right? We're in a workspace that when we're thinking about the cultural norms in our workspaces, we should be thinking, what is the cultural norm, right? You ever had, and some of us might have been those people. We're the problem employee, maybe. That person don't act right, their behavior, I don't know why they would do that. We should challenge that because that could be us assigning some sort of cultural norm in the workplace based on already established, accepted practices, but who got to establish those practices? Who got to set what was normal in a work culture behavior, right? And is there an opportunity to open it up? When I think it was Kinley, maybe, who said, I want to advance, I want to promote, but because I don't make eye contact, that's telling folks that I may not be confident or I don't know what I'm talking about or whatever the thing is. Who gets to assign whether eye contact is a thing that says this person can promote or not, right? So when you're in these conversations, hiring conversations, promoting conversations, when we're thinking about whether someone's being a strong employee, challenge ourselves and challenge each other, right? We will continue to operate because that's what we're used to operating until somebody says, hey, wait a minute, do we mean that? What are we saying if we say that? And we all are empowered to be able to do that. When we do that, we're creating space for more people. So I just wanted some of the comments that you all made really struck me. And I wanted to just um, amplify those, but also challenge us with how we are approaching our work every day. Because sometimes when we think about these systems and structures, we're like, it's hopeless. It's so big. What can I do? And I want to insert opportunities for you to be part of that change. And it's hard, but we all have a role to play in the future we want to create for us all.
And with that, you have so much power in whatever your position is, just to model the way you say somebody's name and you try and get it right, and the way that you do your thing. It's like you're modeling. And so this is so motivating for me to be here with you all because you have all that impact, whether you know it or not. And so let's talk about embracing our authenticity and our identity, because if we can feel like we can be ourselves, then Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islanders, then you can be more interactive and be seen for that leadership position. Megan, can you give us a slice of where did you come from? Give us a slice, a window into your childhood or um, whatever you would comfortable to share or be a little uncomfortable too about how you grew up. You're from Hilltop, Tacoma, is that right? You're on mute.
Sorry, I was born in Tacoma, Washington.
Okay.
And I grew up on Hilltop. So I went to Stanley Elementary School. And what I would say is I was really lucky. I grew up in a really diverse environment. Now, Hilltop is what was majority Black back then. I think it had a large, well, I won't say majority, but it had a large Black population. And uh, And as I grew up too, we moved and I went to Stewart Middle School and then Lincoln High School. And I grew up in a very diverse um, environment. I would say probably maybe more diverse than many folks. And so in our neighborhood, we had a Vietnamese family, some white families, some Black families as well. And so we interacted with all kids from different backgrounds, and I'm better off for it. It was just a norm for me. Lincoln High School is probably one of the most diverse schools I'm just going to say it. I don't know. I don't have the data though, but it's a really diverse high school. And we had people from Samoa there, and from the different ethnic groups in the Asian community. Um, and I understood those different. I didn't understand all the cultural differences, but I knew there were differences, right? So it wasn't like the one person in the whole school. Um, and we had folks who were white, who were black. And so for me, it wasn't it wasn't unique. That growing up with a lot of different people wasn't unique. I had different foods. I love food. Um, and I had friends from different cultural backgrounds um, back in high school. And so um, for me, it was economically different. The things that we would notice when we went to the more white schools, right? They were more they had more money. We grew up, we didn't have a lot of I didn't have a lot of money growing up. We had a good time, we had lots of love, um, but we didn't have a lot of money. And so the schools that I went to, we didn't have a lot. We didn't have the newest technology and all the cool different opportunities that other schools did. Um, and so that's what kind of was different for me. And I like highlighting that because we do live in a segregated society. Some research shows that we are more segregated than we were back in Jim Crow when segregation was legal. And I would think, and I would say, one of the things that I wanted to add to the dialogue too is that Black history isn't known. American history focused on the Black experience isn't really known. This is why you have a lot of the comments that say slavery was a long time ago. Come on. Why can't Black people get it together? Slavery was so long ago. And I'm like, oh wow, you don't know the whole history. I wish they had left us alone after slavery. Reconstruction happened, and then I wish we had been left alone to come and do our thing because we were killing it then. We were doing our thing, right? And then you have the Black codes, and then you have Jim Crow, legal segregation, then you have lynching, then you have the 40s and 50s where a lot of folks got to um, go to college, the government, right? Allowed folks to go to college. You have the GI Bill, right? Go to college, buy low interest um, uh, mortgages, and Black people were largely excluded from those opportunities, and then actually had wealth stolen from them over history. And
So
so,
Megan,
so
let's
for
go
me,
back to you.
oh, go ahead.
Let's
Yeah.
go to you.
So
So
so for me,
yeah.
um, I think that what I like to talk about my background and my experience, and then obviously I'm thinking about some of these things too, is that
Yeah.
um, growing up, when we think about why many people don't get exposed to different cultures, you have to look at the history of racism and segregation. For me, I got to grow up in more of a diverse community, um, even though it wasn't as economically advantaged.
So would you say
Um,
like growing up in your grade school, did you have a mixed group or like my friends were all white, right? I grew up in a white area. So and like were your friends mostly black or mostly diverse or what was it?
Diverse.
Okay.
Yeah, we're diverse. That's what I'm saying. I was incredibly lucky, and I know that maybe my experience isn't always typical. Um, and that's why for me, it's a little bit easier to interact with not to say that I don't have my own biases and stereotypes, but it's easier for me to interact with folks who are different from me because that's what my life story is. And that may not be what you think when you look at me, right? But that's my story.
Well, so you had mentioned you had a Vietnamese neighbor. So what did you know about Asians or kind of like did your family share with you about Black people or about Asians or about white people? Did they kind of given you any guidance on?
We just we just played. We just played you know, I think that's one of the things that I want our education system to do better is to talk. It is to teach more of our history. And I didn't get a lot of that growing up. Um, I probably didn't get a lot of understanding about our history until I went to college. And I started doing, reading the books on my own. Um, my status quo was diversity. It was, uh, poverty, but it was diversity. But I didn't understand a lot of the history until I started reading about Black history. I knew slavery, but I didn't know a lot of the things that came after that. And so I think that now I would say that there were experiences that happened to me over my life, and I didn't understand them until I had the proper context based on more learning to understand why those things were happening. Um, I also uh, think that now, and I would also say that it's true that you know, our there are stereotypes that we have of other ethnic groups as well. I would say that that's true. And as I've grown as a person over time, I have really tried to challenge those by getting to know people directly myself.
So when did you get the talk and what was in your talk? Did you get the talk? And if so, what was it?
Nope, I didn't get to talk. I didn't get.
Wow.
hmm Um, I think, as we've been having dialogue within the, when I talk with folks in the Black community about like what are we doing? I think at some point, you had the end of legalized segregation into Jim Crow, Brown v. Board in 1954. And then we moved into this period of we don't see color blindness, we don't see race, we don't see color, right? Where you can't talk about these things, you can't bring it up. And I think for our parents' generation, some of them said, we're just going to try to make do and get along and do what we need to do, and even if you look at my name, Megan Matthews, my parents were like, well, we want her to get a job interview. So we know if her name sounds white, she'll get a call back. So my parents did things like that, try to put me in positions and opportunities so that I could have the potential to have a better life, whatever, that they thought. Um, and I think now in the Black community, we're kind of reckoning with this color blindness doesn't work. These things are still there. We have to deal with it in a different way. We have to deal with it in a real way. The work continues on. And so I know that folks did get the talk. I know that I've had the conversation with my nephews, after Trayvon Martin was probably the most impactful um, uh, killing. And I was still pretty young when Trayvon Martin was killed. That devastated me. And um, and to have no consequences where this child, and if we think about stereotypes too, this child's walking, a child is walking, right? Black people are um, identified as being older than they are, girls and
Hmm.
boys.
Hmm.
We don't get to be children, right? The 17-year-old kid, and I remember having a conversation with somebody I went to high school with, and he was like, well, look at him. He's on Facebook or whatever he was on, whatever. So he's posting this. And I said, what were you doing in high school? What were we doing? Oh, you're right. Oh my gosh. Yeah, we was kicking it. So somehow these things don't translate where we forget what we were like when we were kids. And this child walking home didn't get to make it home. And so yeah, we have now had this awakening, right? And we have Black Lives Matter movement, all these things saying, hey, we've got to deal with these issues that have continued. They continued happening. And it culminated in George Floyd when kind of the world woke up. And so for me, there's an acknowledgement that there's still work to be done.
Her, all she talks about is
Hello?
how how we're different.
Hello?
Is that I think that was Ton. I just muted
Um,
Ton.
so I want to think about how we are not only acknowledging differences in the need to um, bring to light the things that are happening for all of our communities so that we can all move forward and we can create a space um, where we can where we can all exist and thrive.
So when I was listening, Megan, I was seeing that you were actually not really talking about yourself. Were you aware of that? Like you were speaking, but it was like, oh, kind of, and that's something I think is kind of an Asian thing where, you're trying to like talk about others or give credit to your parents and everything, but you didn't really talk about yourself. And so something to be aware of, right? So if I want to get to know you, I'm asking you a question, and then so it's just like being aware. Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, I talked about how my childhood, what didn't I answer for you?
Well,
What did I not answer?
Um, I I I feel kind of like, okay, you had a good childhood. It was fantastic and diverse and everything was pretty
Oh,
good.
I didn't say that.
That's what I get from that.
Oh,
And so, and it's like, and Hilltop. So my perception of Hilltop, I went to school, University of Puget Sound, in Tacoma, and also I grew up in the suburbs of Seattle. And so it's like you hear Hilltop, oh, there's drive-bys, there's gangs, and I'm older than you. So, but that was back in the day, and so my perception is definitely not good. And I grew in the opposite of what you grew up with and was very white. So so I'll share with you my little privilege over here. So this is me, and so this is at Bon Dori. This is a Seattle event in Karate Kid. You know how they had the Japanese dancing. You saw Karate Kid the first, yeah, okay. So this is Bon Dori. That's that festival, and so this is the one time that we would do like a no, two times. Japanese New Year, which is regular New Year. And then this is in the summer where we get to get dressed up. I'm in a yukata and I get somen and Japanese food. There's Japanese people around me. And I got to meet Lori Matsukawa, who's the King 5 anchor, the only like Japanese American that I've seen in any kind of leadership pretty much my whole life, And so we grew up in the suburbs, grew up in central Seattle, but this is my grandparents, Japanese, and they were forced out of their homes during World War II. And then this is my Chinese grandpa and Swedish grandma. My dad thinks she probably was a prostitute for part of the time, and then she kidnapped my dad a time or two. And my dad has a very interesting story. And here's my parents, and here's my parents' present day. So we grew up we are by Montlake, by the UW Stadium. But we moved out to the suburbs to Bothell to get a better education because at that time, Seattle School District was not in. And so it's this completely white community. And I think, I look back, I'm spilling with privilege. There's my family. We had a house. I had a car. And I was not teased, unlike I think probably the 95% of Asian Americans who grew up in a white community. I was not teased and harassed or beat up. So I think that is why I'm able to speak about Asian American. I can advocate because I don't have all that backstory of the pain that most of them have. My parents, they did believe in spanking. I think I was only spanked like twice. I had a bank account when I was 4. I have a ledger that I still have, 2 cents candy. And so my parents taught me to always be fair and to speak up. And if there's something wrong, somebody's being mean to somebody, you need to do something about it. So this is very different in how many East Asians grew up. And because my dad was somewhat of a foster kid, sort of ish, I was taught to fight. So very unlike many other Asians. And so the whole fairness thing. So I have come from all this privilege, and I look back going, oh yeah, oh my gosh, and listening to so many other Asians, hundreds of Asian Americans who this was not their story. And so when I hear your story from Tacoma and mine, I don't have a strong growing up Asians and black people. We had one black kid, Lauren Martin, but my mom was like, well, he was black and Indian.